folks, welcome back to the Catholic Coaching Podcast. My name is Matt Ingold. I'll be your Catholic coach, your lone Catholic coach for the day. And I got a special interview here with my friend Jim Jansen. Really excited to have Jim Jansen on here. We like to bring people on the podcast that are real examples of a life on mission, right? Our mission at Metanoia Catholic is helping people to discover, discern, and activate their God-given mission. And Jim's a great example of that. And so I'm excited to have him on. I actually ran into Jim at Seek. I was wanting to run into him. He was presenting at Seek. I think that's correct, Jim. Yes. I was wanting to run into him. And it wasn't until, adoration that I actually ran into him. And he was of the 17,000 people. Yeah.
We almost bumped into each other.
It was perfect, man. It was 17,000 people, and he just happened to be like 6 rows in front of me, and it was perfect. And so we were able to organize this together. But if you don't know Jim, Jim's been in ministry for a long time. He's one of those rare people that has actually stayed his entire professional career working in ministry. And so really curious to hear what's keeping you driving, because that's a tough thing to do. He's got a master's in pastoral theology, Ave Maria University, right here in our backyard.
Yes.
And you're one of the OGs from Focus, man. Like 1999, you were one of the original missionaries. Can't wait to get into that backstory. But now you're in the Archdiocese of Omaha. So I'm kind of just jumping through. We're done with the bio. If you got anything else you want to add in here, Jim, go for it.
I'm married. I have 6 kids, from college to kindergarten, and my oldest just signed up to be a Focus missionary himself. So he's like the 5th, 2nd generation Focus missionary, which is pretty cool.
That is pretty cool. Awesome. Well, big shoes to fill, right? But no pressure.
Yeah.
Jim, thanks so much for being on here. I'd love to start in the beginning here. I love stories. Yeah. I've seen you on podcasts before. You're on Ron Huntley's podcast not too long ago. You're sharing your book, a little bit more about your book, A Clear Path. I've got it here. I'm putting it to work for myself. We'll get to that here in a little bit. But I'd love to just hear a little bit of the background, really how you even got started as one of the original Focus missionaries.
Man, so that would be last millennium, right? So 1999. God really changed my life. I'm a Benedictine college grad. God intervened in my life in a really powerful way, beautiful Eucharistic moment. And right after that conversion experience, my roommate invites me to be in a Bible study. But my heart is just at the space where I'm able to say yes. A week earlier, might have punched him. Week later, just would have laughed it off, but it just caught me in just the right spot. And then the next year, I got involved. There's this new associate professor at Benedictine, Edward Sri, and I got involved in his Bible study.
Good guy.
Yeah, and like quite literally, I laugh now because I mentioned my son JP. Just he had to go through like this huge interview process, psychological exam. I went to pizza with Curtis Martin and Ted Sri, and they're like, "Hey, do you want to do it?" I'm like, "Yeah, that sounds really fun." So like that was which was probably good. I don't know how I would have done with the psychological exam, but I was the 11th missionary hired by Focus, and what's interesting is, despite the fact that God had changed my life and intervened, I was still embarrassed to be a missionary. So I remember telling one of my friends that I was going to be a missionary, and he's like, "Oh, you're not going to be one of those people walking around talking about Jesus, are you?" Which is not a bad job description, right? And that's a pretty good summary of what it means to be a missionary. And I was so offended by that, by that thought, that I hit him, which is, I'm not endorsing at all, but I was just like, I was embarrassed to actually preach the gospel. I loved hanging out with people. And then this is like, sadly, right, this didn't just disappear after my first training. I loved hanging out with people. I loved winning people over, in Focus language, winning people over. And I loved building them up and sending them out on mission. It was the part where I had to talk about Jesus and invite them to entrust themselves to him when maybe that wasn't a sure guarantee because they weren't already yet disciples. They weren't already trying to follow him. Mm-hmm. That was hard for me. And that was a conversion process within the life of being a missionary. I remember it was a couple of things happening. One, there were a lot of missionaries who were really, at the time, rediscovering the power of the kerygma, the power of just proclaiming the core gospel message. And I was doing a master's. My master's were from Ave Maria at the time, master's in pastoral theology. And so I'm reading John Paul II and the church's thoughts about evangelization.
And this is as you're a missionary.
Yeah,
you're going through a master's
I was
program.
a couple years in. Yeah. And as I'm reading this, I'm realizing it's like, oh man, there's this essential part of evangelization that I'm not comfortable doing. And praise God, it was my competitive side, friends that had better stories than me, other missionaries, and then really just marinating in the teaching of the church that I'm like, okay, I can do this. And I started to like proclaim the gospel and invite people to entrust themselves to the person of Jesus. And
so that's a big shift. I'd love to park there, Jim, because that's a big shift, because there's a lot of people I think that can identify with that same situation where you're just like, okay, I'm great with building relationships, winning other people over, but as soon as I have to actually throw the J word out there, I actually have to invite the person to actually say yes, which is a central part to even your book here and disciple making. I'm curious, like, what was the mindset that you had before that made it really difficult or embarrassing to kind of go to that place? And then what was the shift?
That's a great question, Matt. I mean, I think a couple of things were in play. One, it was just more than I would like to admit. I was just a product of the world. And so I wasn't, I had experienced Jesus as a savior, as a loving, personal, but I still believed, at least partially, the lie that Jesus was only a divisive figure that made people uncomfortable and whatever. And of course, I mean, to save us, he's not unwilling to make us uncomfortable. But I kind of bought some of the world's lie. I was vain. I didn't want people to think, I'm sanguine. Sure, I like being liked. I didn't want people to think that I was like that guy. And then probably the biggest thing, which was part of the healing process, is I didn't really know the power of the gospel. I mean, the power of a simple proclamation of who Jesus is and what he offers, and inviting someone to respond to that. I didn't know the power of that. And then when I started to see it happen, as I started to see like the gospel reach into people's lives and change their lives, it kind of becomes addictive. It's like, oh, this is great, and you see a whole nother dimension of the Lord's life at work through your life.
Is there a particular moment that you can remember, or maybe a story of where you saw the power of the gospel really effective in somebody's life that kind of started to, I guess, build a little bit more evidence that this is real?
Yeah. I mean, there's a couple. I mean, I got a dozen or more, but like the one that really stuck out, there's this wonderful, wonderful young woman. We'll call her Lisa. Lisa's in the choir, like literally. I mean, she's a faithful girl. She was I was teaching this scripture class at the time. So she's like in the choir. She's taking the scripture class. And I remember I had this conviction. I do this office hours. I'd meet with all the students in the class. And I have this conviction, like I'm supposed to share the gospel with Lisa. And I'm like, okay, I mean, this is, Lisa's about as non-threatening as it gets. She's in the choir. She's a churchy kid, no problem. And I remember I got to the point where I was asking her, I was using a little illustration, like, where are you in your relationship with Jesus? Where do you want to be? And I remember she kind of pointed to the kind of the all in with Jesus picture. Mm-hmm. And she's like, here, I guess. An astute listener that I was, I'm like, you guess? And then it just all tumbled out of her. She's like, I don't know. Well, maybe it was like, if it makes me be a nun, and all of this like fear and desire and confusion just tumbled out of her heart. And I was able to say, like, Lisa, everything you want to be, that's who Jesus is offering you. Right? That's who he wants you to be. The only difference between you and everybody else that seems to have it is they've given him the keys. It's like, why don't you, like, you know where he's at, I'm like gesturing towards the chapel. Just go give him the keys. And she did. And she like came back like the next day. She's like, now what? And so I was able to like, connect her with like a missionary. Funny thing, one of the female missionaries on campus, funny thing was like years later, my very last day as a missionary on campus, I've got this beautiful moment with the Lord. And to my surprise, it's kind of like, I don't know, did I do anything here? Is kind of coming up my last day. And I'm sitting in the chapel and I look over and who's sitting just a few rows, next to me. And so I go over and I talk with her and I think I'm just going to have this quick little exchange. I'm like, hey, thanks.
This is Lisa.
Yeah,
right?
This is Lisa. Yeah.
Lisa. Okay.
Yeah. I'm like, I think I'm just going to have this quick little exchange. Like, hey, thank you. Really, I don't know if you remember that day. And she's like, oh yeah, totally. Actually, I'm glad you're here. I have some questions. So I'm leading this Bible study in the women's prison. And I'm like, holy cow. And just like, I was able to see in like two little snapshots, this amazing transformation that the Lord had worked from someone who was like doing all the things, right? Trying to be as in with Jesus as she could be. But there was something about a clear, explicit proclamation of the gospel and an invitation to give herself to him that changed everything. And so I saw that, and that was the pattern that I've seen again and again and again. Like the gospel isn't just for the far off away people. The gospel's for us. It's for the really close people that need. I think that's what the story of the road to Emmaus is about. I mean, you see Jesus. It clearly as he's coming up on these two disciples, they are disciples. And when you get into it, they know the story. They've heard about the resurrection, but what they're missing is this encounter. And I think that's what the proclamation of the gospel does, is it renews this encounter. It reignites our hearts. I saw that with my friend Lisa, and I've seen it again and again and again. And it was a big part of my kind of ongoing conversion as a missionary.
Your ongoing conversion as a missionary. And I love how you just even put a little bow on that, Jim. Just, I think I can say this for myself. That oftentimes when you're in the role of ministering to others, it's all about the other person, and we miss the mark that no, there's this whole transformation that we're being invited into in and through the ministry. And that actually equips us to continue to do more, because it's no longer we who live, but Christ who lives in us. And at that point. And so you get to see that. Yeah.
And he does it precisely in our confusions and insecurities and inadequacies as we're trying to serve him. And I mean, I am, so grateful for those, all of those conversations. And, there's a dozen other things. That's one of the biggest ones where the Lord continued to, really convert my heart and my mind, even as I'm serving as a missionary.
Yeah. I can even see a bit of a preparation here. So we spoke about in the beginning how you're one of those, I guess you could say, rare cases of somebody that has been able to make ministry their professional career.
Yeah.
And so you stayed, you were a missionary, but you're also a team leader, and you stayed with Focus. What was it, 18 years or so that you were with Focus?
18 years with Focus. And now I've been a little more than 7 years now with the Archdiocese of Omaha.
Okay. What's been the big changes as you move from, a Catholic apostolate into an archdiocese?
Man. So there is I can't overstate how different it is to work with 20-somethings, right, college students in a purely missionary organization, to then, have some responsibility to serve within kind of the institutional church. That's a big change. I think I'm still adjusting to that. And it's great. God bless, a good friend of mine. I'll give him a shout out, Dave Hazen. He greeted me. We were old friends, and he greeted me my first day on the job, at the chancery. He's like, "Wow, so what made you want to become a church bureaucrat?" I'm like, "Oh dear God, what have I done?"
Anyway, dirty word.
But it was one of those things that's like, I don't think the missionary heart has not left me. I have a much broader, picture of the responsibility. I mean, my sense of admiration for the responsibility that our pastors and our bishops in particular carry. I think my love for the priesthood has grown as I see even closer the challenges that they deal with. So, man, the Lord has used it for my sanctification. I've been able to develop, gifts and talents that I just had lain dormant that I hadn't before then. So it was not my idea. I kind of, I resisted it. I loved what I was doing. But the Lord it was definitely a call. And when that was clear, I said yes. And here I am.
And that missional part of your heart that has not gone away, that's still there.
Yeah. Although it's, you have to learn more and more. I think I'm learning a sense of the Lord's timing, in that everything happens in a really at an accelerated pace in the lives of young people. You literally have 4 max, maybe 2, depending on when you meet them, 2 years that they have a bit of amazing availability. There's a number of things that make college ministry faster paced than the rest of, I think, ministry in the church. And so I've had to get used to adjusting my timetables, really to be, if I'm honest, just to be in line with where the Lord's actually working and moving.
Yeah. So who are the people to whom that you're pouring into directly now? So you still have that missional heart. Yeah. It's no longer the 20-somethings, but who are the people that you're really investing in your role here at the Archdiocese? Which again, what's your official role at the Archdiocese now?
So I'm the director of the parish support team. So I'd say the first answer to your question is my team. We have a team of 6 staff members, an administrative assistant, Angie, who helps keep things running smoothly. And then there's 6 of us that serve as coaches and consultants. And we serve all of the parish ministries. Unique, I think, that I'm not aware of very many other places around the country. We have internal specialists for youth ministry, religious ed, marriage prep, again, all the different, Christian initiation, all the different parish ministries. But for the parishes, they just get a pair. So they get Jim and Whitney, or Andy and Jody. And those pair serve all of the ministries within the parish. So St. Patrick's Parish, Jim and Whitney provide the support for the youth ministry, the religious education, the pastor, all the adult evangelization, marriage prep, all of it. Because what we were finding was, one, it's harder and harder to find people with those specialized degrees. We didn't have the chancery budget anymore to have a huge staff and have one person in every specialty. But even more than that, we found that the needs at the parish, it was always the same needs. How do we make disciples, and how do we work together? And it was just a different context. It was marriage prep, religious education, so there were, again, and those contexts are significant. So internally, we have people who have specialized training and background in youth ministry or religious education or marriage prep, et cetera, et cetera. But for the parish's sake, they just have 1-2 people that they call. And we work together to help them work together and to help them learn how to make and mature disciples in whatever context they're serving.
Okay. We're kind of starting to get into a little bit of the nuts and bolts of what's going on in your archdiocese, which I'm excited to have you on here, because I think that you guys are really pioneering a model, so to speak. And pioneers can take a lot of the arrows. There's a lot of trial and error, like your startup, right? And so it's a good thing that you're sanguine, because you need a lot of hope when you're in that startup role.
Yes.
But give a little bit of the context of what the commission was from your archbishop, and how you guys have kind of started to act on it.
Yeah. Well, again, we're so grateful for the freedom and the trust that Archbishop Lucas showed in us. We use it. We kind of he and I we've come back to this metaphor a couple of times, Lewis and Clark, and he's like, they're trying to find a water route to the Pacific. So they'd go down this way and whoop, that's a dead end. They come down this way, and just that we are. He's very patient and tolerant with the entrepreneurial nature, the inventing, that is necessary as you're trying to find a way forward. So there's things that we tried and we're like, well, we don't do that anymore. So he's been really patient with that. And then he's also he's been a bishop for 25 years. So he just kind of knows how this goes. He's like, just because I say so doesn't mean everybody's going to do it. And he's like, we're going to work with the ones who want to do this. If they want to make disciples, if they want to renew their parish, let's work with them and let's make the others jealous. And that's just given us a freedom to figure out what does work. And then what happens is as people watch, they're like, ooh, okay, I want some of that. And so most of our referrals, most of the people that we end up serving that maybe we weren't previously engaged with come because the parish next door is starting to see new life, and people take notice and they're like, hey, what are you guys doing there? And so they eventually get connected with us.
That sounds very familiar. That sounds like a very familiar model, like pouring into those persons of peace. Yeah. And then all of a sudden they start to witness to the people that are around. I mean, it's like, guys, like Jesus is like such a great pioneer for what discipleship, like modeling discipleship. And here it is, like you guys, the wisdom of saying, okay, we're not going to waste our time just trying to convince people, but rather like we're going to let the data speak for itself and let the fruit speak for itself. Yeah.
Well, and the funny thing is like, it's exactly Jesus. And it's also like what the best of like social science and change management would say too. Yeah. People who are familiar with the Rogers innovation curve, the innovators and the early adopters, like they need to see some success because the early majority, those who are watching, some of us by temperament, we're like, I don't want to be first. Don't tell me I'm going to lead the way. There's some things I love leading the way in. Technology, right? Like new tech gear and stuff like that. Like, no, tell me somebody else is using it and that it works for them, and then I might try it. And so, temperamentally, it's just helpful to be aware of those patterns. Some people like to go first. Some people will not go first, and they want to see the success of the people that have led the way. And so that's been helpful for us. It's what social science says. And it's also what Jesus says.
Yeah. You mentioned that there were some things that were just bridges that you're just like, we're not going to go down this way anymore, or initiatives that you started. Are there any that come to mind just for the listeners here that maybe, side note here, I think there just needs to be people that are connected with you guys, and there needs to be a little bit more shared learning. Yeah. That's kind of a part of the big vision here. But say there's somebody that works in an archdiocese or diocese, and they're like, okay, this sounds interesting. What are some of the things that you guys did that were absolute dead ends, and we're just like, I wish we could get that one back?
Oh gosh. How much time do we have, Matt? No. We did a couple of things. There was a board game that we had built that we don't use nearly as often as I would like, called You're the Pastor. It's called You're the Pastor. It was an illustration of the power of investing in making disciples. And it's a lot of fun, but maybe even more than the things that we tried that didn't work. A lot of the things we tried, because kind of like in my gifting, like kind of like my discernment is pretty sharp. So almost everything we tried kind of worked. And so we had to okay, try it again, like tweak it, try it again, tweak it, try it again. It was, I don't know, I mean, I was not around for this, but like, where you're like Edison's light bulb, it's just like, there's like iteration after iteration after iteration. So we've tried various things. So one of the things that has worked, but didn't maybe work super well at first, was this game called like the Thresholds game. And it's on the book, or it's on the clearpathbook.com website. Basically, it takes the thresholds that Sherry Waddell, and then I added some stuff that Focus uses. And it's just this like little character game where you go through and you, instead of like reading a long chapter or getting a lecture about the process of conversion and growth in discipleship, you just play this little game. And that game has undergone, I mean, I don't know, we didn't track it, but we're probably at it'd be 13.5. I mean, we've just continued to make little improvements and little improvements. And we spend a lot of time in church basements, and we spend a lot of time teaching people about evangelization. And so we're just constantly watching and learning and making improvements.
I'm fascinated by this game. Like, is it literally a board game that you have, or is that just kind of a metaphor?
So there's two different things. The board game with like the cool figures, we're not, that's been shelved. We're not using that very, very often. But the Thresholds game, clearpathbook.com, you can download it there. It's free. And in about 45 minutes, maybe an hour, it's super simple. I mean, it takes actually about 30 minutes, but then it's the discussion, right, that flows from it. You play this game and people start to recognize these characters like a Matt and a Jim and an Adam and a Lisa. And you go through, these characters are like, hey, where are they at in their spiritual journey? And pretty quickly what you begin to see is how, wow, Adam, who like everything he learns about the church comes from CNN. You're like, yeah, Adam's never going to come to a Bible study on church grounds. Well, gosh, how could we get Adam? And all of a sudden, like, instead of being told about the process of evangelization, people kind of discover it through the playing of this game and the conversation. So it's part of it shows up in the book. I reference it a couple times. It's just a tool that we've developed and then continue to refine over the years to help individuals, well, really to help leaders, pastors, evangelization coordinators, like help orientate people to the process of evangelization. Because I mean, I'm a church nerd. I love all the documents and I love all the things in there, but you can get lost in that language really quickly. Yeah. And this is a very simple, accessible language and a very easy way where I don't have to be a lecturer. I'm just like, hey, let's play this game. And 45 minutes later, people are like, oh, I get it.
Yeah, it really, like what it sounds like you're doing, and you correct me if I'm wrong here. So I'm open up the book. I'm on page 53 right now, and it's one of the many pages that you have this clear path of this discipleship laid out, right? And you go from relational outreach. There's that kind of phase one where you have the trust and the openness, and then there's the conversion moment where the person's actively seeking, and then they make a decision for Christ, and that's kind of like the center of the hourglass, is if you're going off of Michael Hall's model. And then you go into the faith formation. That's really where somebody's learning about the faith. And then the evangelization formation is where you're actually helping somebody to go out on mission and be a disciple maker at that point. So with this game, this Thresholds game, it sounds like you're training people to be astute, to recognize where somebody is at on that path so that they can tailor their approach to where the person's at.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. This
amazing.
It came from my missionary days because, there were, and again, we use a little bit of a simplified version of this. There are kind of more gradations in some, the original kind of mental model that Sherry Waddell provided had a lot of gradations. And that was super helpful. Just like I was blessed to be a part of the first foray that Focus gave into reaching out to Division I athletes. And right now there's a lot of momentum and there's a ton of athletes. But when we were first getting started, it was tough sledding, and if you got, and our missionaries would stand on the sidelines of practices, and the coaches were like, thought we were great. And they're like, yeah. And they'd sometimes make some introductions, but getting an athlete to actually come and make their precious free time, make time to meet with you, to go to a Bible study, that was a hard sell at first. And what we recognized, I can't go from weird stranger on the sideline to, hey, do you want to be in my Bible study in one conversation? I need to develop some trust, right? And I need to watch, as I develop just a natural friendship with this person, I treat him as a person, to whether is there any openness? Is there anything about their life where there might be a dissatisfaction that could be a foothold for the gospel? And so that we needed we needed a little bit of a nuance way to look at hey, what is happening? What is the Lord doing in this person's mind and heart? And so yeah, that started way back in my missionary days. And then it's become a really helpful tool to provide parishes a common language around what do we mean by evangelization. Because Matt, part of the challenge is when people say evangelization, everybody means different things. Some people think the really solid catechesis, right? Let's teach people about the Eucharist. And other people mean hospitality. And some people, most people don't, but a small number are like, no, I mean evangelization. I mean equipping people to evangelize. And everybody meant something different. And they were all right. And they were all missing something. And so this gave us a chance to provide a simple framework for this is what the process of conversion looks like. And this is what the process of like missionary maturity looks like.
I want to go back to standing on the sideline and those practices, because it's a really interesting concept to me. You said one of the things that you said as you were thinking through, like, how do we build trust? And then the questions went to, what is a need that they have? What is a pain that they have? And we have a podcast episode saying that's all about why people aren't coming to your Bible study. And it was all about just calling attention to a Bible study is, people say yes to a Bible study when they want the benefits of a Bible study, when they actually have a desire to learn more about the Lord through a Bible study. But if they don't have that desire, why would they say yes to a Bible study? And so starting with that desire, what were some of those desires that you were able to tap into to start that trust, that relationship building phase of the journey?
Oh man, it's pretty universal. I mean, and it's only intensified, but like, I think most people are lonely.
Wow.
I mean, when it really comes down to like someone who will actually listen to them and will care about them as a person, not for, I mean, this is why it would take a little while, but athletes were a commodity. And man, has that changed even more, in the last few years with NIL money and et cetera. But like, when an athlete finally figured out that there's this person in my life who seems to care for me, like just for who I am,
regardless of performance.
That was disorienting to them. They didn't know what to do because sadly their teammates, their coaches, sometimes even their parents, like they didn't have a whole lot of relationships where people loved them for who they were. And so I think, the universals, being seen, being known, being loved, respected. I mean, all those like really deep things, those are always the fundamentals of evangelization. And that's partially what I like about the thresholds, because I think intuitively people know this. So one of the fun things that always happens when we play this game is, I ask people about their own insecurities about evangelization. And everybody always talks about like, well, I just don't know enough. And like, well, what do you mean? It's like, well, like if they ask me a question about church teaching or this and this, that. Okay. And then I point to in the threshold, visually on the left side, people who don't really trust the church yet. They're not so sure, or maybe they're just trusting the church and they're just kind of starting to go on a spiritual journey. They're kind of starting to seek. It's like, now let me ask you, do these people care about the answers to church questions? It's like, well, no. Well, like, what do they care about? They care if I care. It's like, yes. And like, again and again, what I love, one of the epiphanies that often happens when people play this game is they realize, oh, what I'm afraid of isn't actually a real obstacle to evangelization. Like my ability to just love people, to listen to them. I mean, it's not the only thing. There is a real place, right, for proclaiming the gospel and for teaching people. But for those who maybe aren't, that they and their friend, that's not where the journey is at right now. They don't need to be angsty about that, because the Lord is going to use their love, their listening, their friendship to help get them to the next place. And even better, right, in a clear path context, suddenly, like, this is a communal thing. It's not, you're not alone, because evangelization is a team sport. And you actually, when it comes time for them to learn about the Eucharist, you've got a teammate that you can tag in who's like made for teaching,
Yes.
who loves to do that. And you can be that bridge to connect them.
Made for teaching. I love that. And I'd love to kind of pivot over here because you spoke about evangelization being a team sport. And even before we got the cameras rolling here, you were talking about temperaments and how they've been a large part of your journey. And it's a huge part of what we do at Metanoia Catholic.
Yes.
It's how we help people explore their unique design. There's other assessments that you could use, but temperaments are just so, like, it's so foundational, and it's just there's a simplicity to them as well. And but I'd love to hear how temperaments and understanding someone's unique design is playing into, putting people in the right roles within this team that's going out and evangelizing.
Well, I mean, so a couple things. Like, I was using temperaments. I mean, think back in 99, 2000, because what I recognize is just because somebody is a missionary disciple and they love Jesus doesn't mean, one, they understand how the Lord has made them for his service. And it certainly doesn't mean that they understand and appreciate this person next to them. And what I loved about it is, like, it's very simple. It's classic. I mean, it's like centuries old, more than that.
Millennia.
Millennia old. Yeah. And it's like, it helped, it gave people a language to understand themselves, to express their often maybe a moment of unique need or perspective. They were able to kind of couch that. It's like, I'm sorry. This is just my melancholic. But does anybody ever wonder about, and they were to express themselves, and then they were able to recognize the beauty and uniqueness of this other person. So I think I feel like it's essential, is like, I don't want to throw that word around lightly, but I think it's an essential tool for any missional team. And that would be like a team that's working together, let's say, to run a parish retreat, or, we're the group that works together to help shepherd the small group movement, or youth ministry, or a pastor's leadership team. Like, having some sort of common language around who I am, how the Lord has made me, who you are, how the Lord has made you. That's just huge.
Yeah. We rolled it out a couple of years ago. We did our first ever temperaments workshop over here in our backyard at Ave Maria University. And, I remember we just fumbled through it. Aaron, it had all kinds of typos in it. Gave it to the girls' soccer team there, and we kept close to touch. I mean, it's a small town here in Ave Maria, and so we were close with some of the players. We'd go to the games, and I just love being a presence on that campus. It's just to be a small part of what's happening over there. You get it. You're an alumnus.
Well, but, I know the soccer coach.
Tyler. Yeah,
Tyler's great.
He's a rock star. He and Talia are great. Tyler's wife, Danae, she went through her certification. She's just phenomenal. Such a gift for coaching. She's even working right now with Matt Rudolph in his prison ministry, and so she's getting to be a gift to a lot of the priests and bishops that he's serving there.
Awesome.
But I remember it was like a year after we had done the workshop, the temperaments workshop with him, and I ran into their coach Talia, one of the assistant coaches, and I was just like, "Hey, just curious, are you guys like, did that stick, that whole temperaments thing? Do you still use it? Does that ever come up in conversation?" She goes, "Matt, every day day it's part of our language."
That's awesome.
And they saw such a value of it because when they got done with that workshop, all of a sudden there was clarity to why other people were acting the way they were acting, and all the judgments that we had towards the way that they were acting, and we were taking personally, and it starts to remove some of the personal, taking it all personally, and
good. Yes.
But they kept beating the drum on it. And so it really has a way of I say, building a culture of unique design where you approach the other person as mystery, and you get rid of all that presumptive judgment that really is so toxic on a ministry team.
Oh yeah. Yeah, totally. I mean, I wonder what kind of like positive effect it has had on, like, the team unity for the soccer team. But man, like what it did, I mean, what it did for my missionary teams, and then now, the parish support team here at the Archdiocese, and then seeing, similar tools at use for parishes. They're fantastic.
Yeah, they were even using in recruiting.
Yeah,
Like,
that's awesome.
And just recognizing just how you can't have a team that's all melancholics, and Tyler is deeply melancholic, the coach, and so just recognizing that, like, we just likes like, right? We tend to attract people that are like us, but also recognizing that there's a great gift in the diversity of the temperaments within an organization, because they show up and do things differently, and there's great complementarity there.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I love it.
Exciting. So I've got a question here. Even sticking with temperaments here for a moment longer.
Yeah.
So considering this full kind of spectrum that you've got, you lay out here, and starting with the phases of evangelization, the self-awareness that temperaments bring, how do you see that serving at the different phases of discipleship that you have?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I think honestly, I think you could deploy it almost anywhere, right? So I would say, like, at the very front end, oftentimes, like, people, like, the church is an expert in the human person, right? And God, but like in the human person. And so helping people come to know who they are, by leaning into something that is maybe not explicitly, part of the gospel, a la the temperaments, that's attractive to people.
Yeah.
Right. So I could see it as like a pre-evangelization tool, just at the beginning of people's spiritual journey. They're like, hey, these folks have something to say. Like, I understand myself better because of this awareness they've given me, this mental framework. And by the way, it's ancient. And anyway, so you could use it very much at the beginning. I could also imagine someone just fresh off their conversion, beginning to grow in, again, self-understanding about who they are and how the Lord has uniquely made them, which could really fuel their journey of faith. Again, for those of us who are sanguine dominant, like, just knowing that, like, hey, I'm going to get distracted, and I need to labor, right, to keep my attention focused on the Lord in prayer. But what is hard for me, because I'm a sanguine, maybe staying focused in prayer, forgiveness tends to come a little bit easier. I'm like, I'm sorry, I didn't even remember. Did you do something mean? And so it's just one of those things that, like, there are some virtues that are going to come easier for me, and there's some vices that are going to come easier for me. That could be really helpful for people at the beginning of their faith journey, the explicit part where they're now trying to live as a disciple. And of course, we already talked about, like, for those who are really going on mission, Jesus doesn't send people on mission alone. He sends people out 2 by 2. And so having this framework to understand yourself and the person next to you is fantastic.
I love that you say that there's common vices and common virtues that are associated with the temperaments. And folks, if you're curious about that, I'm going to put the resource in the show notes here, but we also have it at catholiccoaching.com and our free resources section there, so you can go check it out. But we have a temperaments report that goes through all of the 4 different temperaments, and it actually shares some of those common vices and common virtues with a number of other things, common strengths that you have. And so that's a great resource to be able to go and just start to name and claim. Again, some of these things, it's not meant to say, hey, this is you. We're not imposing anything on you. It's use this. We always say temperaments are a great starting point to start, like you said earlier, Jim. It gives you a language to start to describe some of these interior experiences, and just giving a language to it. And that language creates culture, and that culture of unique design is such a dignifying culture.
Yeah, it is. And it's different. I mean, we live in kind of a plastic, mass-produced, everybody's the same, simply you're a consumer and you're a part of a cog in the machine. Again, a simple framework. That's part of, I think, the genius. There's a lot of more complicated, and I like all those things. I like those nuances, those other tools. There's some value there, but I think the simplicity of the temperaments, I mean, literally, it's millennia old. There's some power there, because for for the kind of the team dynamic to take root, people need to know what other people are.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're working with, dozens and dozens of different labels and names, it can be really hard for other people to I'm sorry, what are you again?
Yeah.
But it's but if you only got, sanguine, choleric, melancholic, phlegmatic, you're just okay, I get it. And that helps. So the simplicity is really part of the power.
Yes. Indeed. There was maybe you've read up on Strengths Finder. I know you're familiar with that.
Yes.
And there was a book.
I'm a Strengths Finder coach.
Yeah. So it's a great value, a lot more nuance. There was a priest, I interviewed him, episode 92 of the Catholic Coaching Podcast, Father Bill Hansen. He wrote the foreword to Strengths Finder Catholic, Living in Your Strengths Catholic Edition. He wrote the foreword for it. And at one point he was the pastor of the most actively engaged, the largest actively engaged population church in all the United States, Christian and Catholic. And he has this incredible story that we unpack in that podcast, where he went from a bankrupt church that was in this massive 6-figure deficit every single year to one that had a 6-figure surplus every single year, thriving ministries, even to the point where there were miracles that were happening in the parish.
That's awesome.
And it was using this tool, Strengths Finder, to really help people understand what it is that they do best, so they could show up and be that sincere gift of self. Man cannot know himself except through that sincere gift of self. And there's this great joy and engagement that happened with that. And with the massive success that he saw, the burning question that's in my brain here is, why aren't other people going and replicating this? Because I don't think there's a pastor that's out there that's struggling to keep the place afloat that wouldn't love to have the complete opposite, that flip side, that wouldn't love to have Father Bill's story. But I think it gets into what you're talking about here, is the complexity of some of these assessment tools out there, but you insert a little bit of simplicity. Goodness gracious. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that too, Jim.
No, I mean, I totally agree. I mean, I served as a professional missionary for, again, almost 20 years. And part of what I've been doing, in my work here with the Archdiocese is taking some of those tools and reworking them to only have 3 buttons, right? So they're more simple, they're more accessible, they're more transferable. Again, we live in a world where everything is complicated, and you watch the products. Again, I'm I don't work for Apple, but part of the reason Apple products have done so well is that they're just simple. They're intuitive, and not everything in the teachings of Jesus is intuitive. A lot of it is counterintuitive, but we don't want to make anything more complicated than we need to. So yeah, I feel like it's a huge thing, and something that is part of the whole thing with the clear path is to actually make it clear. I mean, we live in this world where we experience the multiplication of choices in our lives as exhausting. Whether it's, death scrolling on Netflix, what are we going to watch tonight? Or whether it's, all of the smells at Yankee Candle. We experience it, and the data shows when we overwhelm people with choices, they just choose not to choose. They just disengage.
Yep.
And unfortunately, our own experience hasn't filtered down into our pastoral experience of running parishes, where we oversaturate people with choices. Meaning well, right? In our parishes, we have something for everybody. Yeah, but the problem is people don't know how to self-select. What is this thing? How does this fit? And with too many choices, people get overwhelmed. And part of a genius of a clear path is that it fits into this simplicity kind of genius, in that it's this is where I get started. Yeah, this is where you get started.
Yeah. Let's talk more about a clear path here, because it's one thing to be passionate about this. It's another thing to write a book, and it's not the first book that's been written on discipleship. And so, I'm curious, what was the need that you saw that was not being addressed that you really wanted to address with this book?
Yeah. Honestly, it was very personal, Matt. So we didn't talk about this, but for my 18 years with Focus, I spent the entire time in Lincoln, Nebraska. That's really weird. Like I never got to relocate. Never, I always had dreams like they're going to send me to Montana. Nope, Nebraska the whole time. And like but I got to see all of these kids from Nebraska come to the university, have the Lord change their life, and then I got to see them settle and start their families and enter into parish life. And you know what happened when they entered into parish life? Not much. I mean, praise God, they were faithful Catholics. They sang in the choir. They tried to raise their kids Catholic, and there's nothing, we should not take that for granted because it isn't always the case. But we wanted more than that. We didn't just want to keep them safe. We wanted to make them dangerous. We wanted them to be salt and light in their neighborhood and their professions and their family, falling away, siblings and cousins. And it wasn't happening. They weren't leading small groups. They weren't mentoring others. And there's a lot of things that were at play there. But one of those, which came into focus for me when it became my job when I moved here to the Archdiocese, was the culture and structures of parishes were not conducive to these missionaries bearing all the fruit that they could. Literally, they were Hall of Fame missionaries. I saw them do amazing things. I saw the fruit of their life and their witness. And then it's like it got like shriveled up when they got into a typical parish culture. And when you looked closer, it was still there. They were still bearing fruit, but it wasn't near what it could have been. It wasn't what it used to be. And what I realized was when you sort out all the different factors, and college is different than typical parish life. Any missionary disciple is like a vine, right? Or like an apple tree. Like it's going to bear fruit, but it bears a lot more fruit when it has a trellis. And that's what a clear path is. That even people who have missionary skills, they know how to share their story. They know how to draw people in friendship, and they know how to lead small groups. All the stuff, they know how to do things. They still need a context to help them along the way, right? They're like, man, it'd be really nice if our parish had some sort of ministry that when I'm making friends with people, that I could just kind of bring them to this safe place where it's low key. Everybody here is an awesome, faithful Christian themselves. They're going to make other good friends. And after marinating in that environment for a while, then when they're ready, I have a place where I can bring them where I know they're going to hear the gospel and they're going to get a chance to make a decision for Jesus. And then I have some place that I know I could bring them where they could grow and mature and learn what it means to really live as a disciple. And then when they're ready, there's some place that I could bring them that's going to help equip them as a disciple. Again, as a professional missionary, I knew how to do all those things, but doing it alone, oh my goodness, that's a lot. And so having a context in your parish that helps people connect, helps people get in, make a decision, have a conversion, connect to Jesus, help them grow as a disciple, and then help them get equipped as a missionary disciple, that's huge. And so a lot of it was personal. I saw these amazing people I knew that were struggling to do that because the parish culture, even the parishes that were trying, it wasn't conducive. The structure and the culture wasn't conducive to actually making disciples.
So you kept saying, bring them to a place. And then when they kind of hit that next phase, I bring them to a place. So, and if we jumped into one of these parishes, and there's even a parish that you use as a case study, and maybe you can just draw from that, Jim. But what do those places, I'm using air quotes here for people listening, what do those places look like?
Yeah. So, I'm intentionally not using the word program because I think there's kind of this American, Achilles heel that we're like, all right, what's the program? And it's programs are tools and tools are good, but, people evangelize people. Missionary disciples evangelize people. It's not about the programs. The programs provide that context or place, right? So we want to avoid the trap of programs and events alone, and we want to think more in a ministry context. So a context or a ministry that you might think about. It's like men's softball. I use this example in the book of like, imagine a group of guys, they love beer, they love wings, they love softball, and they love Jesus. And what they do is they start a men's softball league so that they have a place that they can invite other guys, so they just get to spend time with them, right? And that time spent in the dugout, at games and practices, and then, maybe a drink after the game, that develops a relationship so that when the time is right, they can say, hey, you should come with me on the retreat next month. No, I know. I know you think it's crazy, but no, seriously, like, and maybe you can reference back to that like moment of real conversation you had. It's like, I think you would like this. And to have a context, a place, in this case, men's softball, where real friendships can develop and trust can be built, that's essential. And oftentimes parishes realize like, oh, we don't have anything like that. We have things that could be that. Maybe the pancake feed, maybe the fish fry could be that. But the current reality is the fish fry is just an assembly line to make money, right? And we get people and we have them eat their fish as fast as they possibly can, and then we get them out the door and we get another butt in that seat. So for parishes, when they start to recognize, oh my goodness, what would it look like for us to actually have a context where we can like reach out to people? It starts to be really revolutionary. And again, there's just kind of I suggest having 4 main steps on your clear path. Relational outreach, that's a place, like the softball league, a conversion moment that basically when people are ready to ask some of those questions, when they're open to an encounter with Jesus, you either have a retreat, maybe it's a program like Alpha or Christ Life. You have a place where they can have that encounter and they can get those questions answered. And then when people entrust themselves to the Lord, then there needs to be what we commonly refer to as faith formation. That's a thing that most parishes have. A place where like, okay, now I learn what it means to live as a disciple. But again, maybe not the kind of dry faith formation that some parishes offer, but this is like a real rich, communal, almost mentored experience of what it means to live as a disciple. And then finally, boom, a place where we call it evangelization formation, where people can be equipped for mission. And I think that's at least two or three key elements, right? So an evangelization formation ministry would unquestionably have something like temperaments or charisms to help people recognize how the Lord has made them for mission. There would be unequivocally something that teaches them just basic skills of evangelization. How do you share your story? How do you facilitate a small group? How do you listen for what the Lord is doing in people's lives? How do you intercede for people? Just basic missionary 101 skills. And then finally, there probably has to be some fellowship, because trying to live on mission can be lonely. And so a full-fledged evangelization formation ministry would have the fellowship, it'd have the kind of charism, temperament thing to it, and it would have some basic evangelization skill training.
Got it. Okay. So they've got the skill training, and then those people are getting equipped in the skill training to go back to the softball team.
Yeah. Or to their place of work, or to their neighborhood, or to their fallen away family. Like that's the really fun part. Like once we do our part for the equipping, the Lord has a mission in mind for them. Right. And so with a little bit of, this is the fun part of pastoring, rather than like, putting out fires and, resolving conflicts. Again, not that those things don't matter, but being able to help people recognize, like, I think the Lord is calling me to like start this moms group, like at the park with like the other kind of crazy moms. Like the things they say make me uncomfortable, except for I love them. And I think Jesus loves them. Well, I know Jesus. I think he wants to love them through me. Man, that is a great thing to help your people discern.
Love it. So reading the book here, so for the people that want to go out and, again, Clear Path, where can they find it?
It's on Amazon. It's both Kindle, and regular paperback. But you can go to clearpathbook.com, and that has, of course, how you can order the book, but it also has that game, the Thresholds game I was talking about, number of other resources there.
Jim,
clearpathbook.com.
Yeah, and oftentimes people put books out nowadays, and it's kind of like their gateway into getting more from them. And I'm curious, if somebody picks this up and reads it, is there something yet where they can go and they can start, being mentored by somebody like you or one of your people on the team to start to deploy some of these things at their own parish?
Man, that's a great question. So yes and no. There is. I just commissioned
you, Jim.
You've
been anointed.
I know. So I do a little bit of consulting work on the side. So I'm not adverse to having a conversation with someone. But part of what the book is designed to do, and people can find my information on the website, but part of what the book is designed to do is it's short chapters and there's discussion questions at the end of every chapter, so that you can read it with a team. So, I'm not adverse to being an encouragement or a help to people where I can, but you can read this book as a team and say, okay, together, first, let's do the temperament test. And then next, together, how does the Lord want us, right, to do this? And so you can begin to read it as a team. You can use the game and the free resources from the website to begin to move forward in building a clear path in your parish or your ministry.
Yeah. Yeah. And even my systems brain is kind of going, okay, like the type of people that would need to be on that team,
Yes.
it's not just a team full of introverts, and it's not a team full of sanguines either. I mean, there's everybody's going to have their own genius that they bring. And, this kind of calls my attention. I'm going to open up another assessment tool here, APEST.
Yes.
You've heard of that one.
Yes, I have.
I love it because it really helps you to identify what some of the roles are: apostolic, prophetic, evangelistic, shepherding, and teaching, right? The fivefold gifting from Ephesians 5, I think, 4 or 5.
I think so.
And somebody can call me out in the comments. But it's the necessity of having all of those represented on that team, and that's just like that powerhouse evangelization team that has all of those roles and cover down on them, or at least as best as you can. And so sometimes it's even recognizing that, wow, we really need to have somebody. We need to expand this team. So we've got more of the talent or more of the charisms that we're looking for. And it's even praying for the Lord to send you those people, or let you anoint those people. That might even be the first step. Yeah,
absolutely. And that's another, some of these things start to overlay with each other. But what is fun is when you get people, let's say, okay, they're aware of their temperament, maybe a charism. Then they've got this kind of like the thresholds. They see this process that people typically go through in conversion and discipleship, and they can start to recognize the patterns. Like, man, seems like the Lord really loves to use me. True story, right? This is a friend of mine. She's a real estate agent. She's sanguine. The Lord loves to use her at the very beginning of the journey. I mean, she joked, it's like I have this sign on my forehead that says, please tell me, your deepest, darkest secrets. And she just instantly wins trust with people. And she's so gifted at doing that. But she's like, I don't work for the church and I love the church, but I'm not the girl you want explaining the finer details of theology to people. But she recognizes, because of both temperaments and these thresholds, hey, this is where the Lord likes to use me. And so she makes herself available there. And she doesn't have any insecurity about trying to, or any false pretending, trying to be something that she's not. She evangelizes in community. And so she's able to then bring people and bridge relationships to those who have gifts that complement her own.
That's just so beautiful. I mean, the way that the Lord has designed the body of Christ to actually need all the members of the body of Christ. I was actually just this last weekend, I was sitting down with one of our coaches, our certified coaches, is her and her husband came into town. It's great when you have an online business, online community to actually meet people in real life. It's fun, like share a meal with them. And so she was choleric, melancholic. He was super sanguine. And he was describing how where the Lord puts him again and again, his name is Bill, is inviting people to the Cursillo weekends.
Yeah.
And the way that Cursillo is set up is like you invite somebody and then you sponsor somebody. But his real charism is the invitation, the bold invitation to the point where people are like, whoa. But he's, and there's so many people that they're like, I would love to just walk with somebody, but please don't make me invite somebody. Please don't make me be the person. And so we talked about, I was like, what would it be like if you just started to kind of like be the guy that invited people, but then you kind of pass them off to somebody that really had that gift of shepherding and walking with somebody. He goes, you know what? It's funny you mentioned that. We're actually the first time we're doing this, but me and a friend are actually co-sponsoring somebody that's going through it. And so it's just like that whole thing is just allowing him to creating some space for him to really live in that gift. Where he has just like a supernatural fecundity and fruitfulness in his mission.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the benefits of what a Clear Path does, is that when you get these contexts, these ministries in place, people who are gifted, like made by the Lord to serve in that way, tend to gravitate to those spaces. And then they're joyfully able to help people grow and mature into the next season, the next step on the Clear Path. And it just like the sense of unity that you get. Again, sometimes we think that like simple uniformity provides unity, and there's I think maybe a superficial unity that you get where everybody's the same. But I think the really profound unity you see is when you see like athletic, right? Like a football team of like great diversity. And then there's this goal and this prize and some challenge along the way, man, like you can see that in parishes and mission organizations that have rediscovered their missionary identity, where they've got people who are gifted as teachers and people who are gifted as inviters, and people that are like they're administrators, and everybody's like, oh dear God, please don't make me work on the spreadsheet. And other people are like, spreadsheets are my love language, and just to see all those people working together to save souls, it's really, really fun. Love it.
Jim, this has been like fantastic. It gets me excited. I mean, anytime I see somebody else that's doing something and what their unique mission is, and and just going to sound kind of selfish, but like it just reflects back to me what God's invited me to do, because it's different. And there's something about living in your gift that starts to help and being in relationship with other people here and laboring in the vineyard together, where you start to really come to understand your place in where you belong in the whole, kingdom building endeavor here that our church is on. And it's incredibly affirming. I know that here at Metanoia Catholic, especially when it comes to temperaments and helping people to understand their unique design, the gifts that God has given to them, that is our absolute bread and butter. We love coming in and doing workshops for teams. We love being able to equip you with coaches that can be in your team and in your organization, and just with the skills and that temperaments language to be able to do these things in house. We have a vision here of having like a temperaments coach or one of our mindset coaches in every single parish, or available to every single parish. Because like you said, like just helping people to begin that journey of self-awareness and recognizing the gift that they are through the language of these assessments. Oh my goodness. It's dynamite. Love it, love it, love it.
Well, thanks, man. Thanks for what you guys are doing. It's been really, really fun. Even before we turned on the mics, we're like, oh man, there's just, so many overlaps, friends that we know. I didn't know that you knew the Rossers, common friends, and then journeys, just the power of temperaments, the assessments, coaching. I really appreciate what you guys are doing.
No, we can hang out. We can hang out, man, and have a beer, have a coffee, whatever your flavor is. Have a tea.
How about this? We'll come to Nebraska in the fall, but I wouldn't mind a February trip to
Florida. Well, there's something Jim, I'll tell you this: is there something that we've started to do? It's turning into a little bit more of an annual thing where we're kind of convening just people that are doing some of this work, and particularly in the human formation field or in the coaching field. It's our second time that we did it, and it's a super powerful. We just came together and prayed. And it was so powerful, just speaking as a group of people. We had, Dr. Jerry Creek came in, and Jim Beckman and Matt Rudolph, and I'm not going to name everybody because there's just so many awesome people that were there. Awesome. And it was just so fun to build relationship. And again, that relationship that starts to reveal identity, what relationship, identity, mission. Even being in relationship with these other players helps us understand our apostolic identity, right? As different apostolates, and then what our mission field is and what it isn't, right? Because Jim's got that covered, or Matt's got that covered, or something.
Absolutely,
yeah. Cool. All right. Plug one more time here for Clear Path. Where can they find this? Where can everybody find this?
It's on Amazon, but you can find it at clearpathbook.com. And there's some other free resources there, and that'll give you a link. And if anybody's, if they're like, okay, we want to lean into this, we can give you a bulk discount for orders of 10 or more. So all the contact information is on the website there, clearpathbook.com.
Awesome. And if you're excited about temperaments, you can just find that on our free resources here at metanoiacatholic.com as well, or catholiccoaching.com, because nobody knows how to spell metanoia. Jim, thank you so much, man. I know Greek names, we thought we were being clever, and it's just like, oh my goodness, it's terrible.
Really? Oops. Yeah.
But thank you so much, Jim, for taking the extra time here. I could go another 2 hours with this. We won't do that, but this is just... This is a joy, man. Thanks. It's joy being a laborer in the vineyard here with you.
Thank you, Matt. Yeah, I've had fun too. Really appreciate it.
God bless. Hey, thanks for sticking with us in the Catholic Coaching Podcast. If you like what you heard,
please like and subscribe, and we'll see you again.